Hello and welcome to Michigan Planning Today, where we explore urban planning and real estate development issues across Michigan. I'm your host, Bob Gibbs, and today's guest is Geoff Hockman. Jeff, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jeff.
Well, real quickly, I have started out looking for Deloitte Touche as a management consultant in my early years and did a lot of work in the government sector. And also did work that started the EMS system in Detroit and a lot of other kinds of things, and worked on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline in Alaska and lived there and all that stuff. After that, I went to work for a small business, and then from that, I was involved with the presidential campaign for John Glenn. But my college roommate was his AA at the time, and I became in charge of all business operations for a presidential campaign. That's a trip, and that was an interesting experience back in 1984. And then from there, I got into commercial real estate with Tony Brown, and then I became a co-founder of the Townsend Hotel in 1988. And then from that, we got into other hotels and other commercial real estate, and then for the next 20 years. And then from that, I've now worked for a Native American Indian tribe in North Dakota, 3 affiliated tribes, helping them with government contracts. And with that, there's special considerations for Native American tribes to get contracts, and so the benefits go back to the tribe. So that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, so it's been very good. So
you've been very busy.
Yeah, it's been very wonderful. But independently of that, also I was very involved in community service. I was on the city commission and mayor of Birmingham. I served 2 terms, and then from there I went to serve 4 terms on the Birmingham school board. And then other than that, I also was a director of Beaumont Hospital for almost 30 years, and chairman of the foundation for 28 years, and we raised over $1 billion for Beaumont. So, and now I'm chairman of a foundation called Oakland Housing, and we build housing for first home buyers, and we're doing a project right now in Detroit. So lots of other things.
Fascinating background.
Yeah, so lots of things.
I'm not quite sure where to begin, but did you say your roommates with John Glenn? Is that what I heard?
Oh, he was administrative assistant for John Glenn.
I see.
And so when he ran for president.
First presidential campaign.
Yeah, so
Great.
we got into that.
Jeff, we could do a whole program, I think, just on the last 4 or 5 aspects of your career. But I know you've been the mayor and director of the Birmingham Shopping District. Can you start with that, can you tell us a little bit about what the Birmingham Shopping District is?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, because it's somewhat unique in the state governance, because you had economic development zones, which is DDAs, which we did. We did a study, an ad hoc committee, because there's a thing called North Somerset Mall was being built. And the downtown people, Richard Astron and Art Shergan, Larry Sherman, Bob Delore, were concerned about how we promote and market the downtown Birmingham with that large mall coming in. And so we looked at what was possible to do that. And so we had, of course, it's Birmingham, so we had a committee. And we studied it and found out that we needed to change the state law. Larry Sherman happened at the time to be on the Michigan Retailers Association. So with their group, they went ahead and got the law amended to create, in 1992, principal shopping districts throughout the state. There's not a lot of them in the state: Grand Rapids, Lansing, Rochester, Birmingham. There's a few. But let me just real quickly tell you about what the purpose of that is. You think almost like a mall from a real estate viewpoint is a common area. It does the marketing, promotion, and some basic maintenance in the downtown area. And what it allows us to do under the law change was create a district. We could create multiple districts, and we created 2, one on one side of Woodward, one on the other. And those 2 districts then started to do all the promotional. I was fortunate to be chair for almost 30 years. I was one of the original board members. And so I've got to see it grow and evolve over time. And it's been exciting to see what an idea was and then see what reality is.
Well, Birmingham, as many know, is one of the most vibrant cities, probably in the Midwest, if not a larger area. And a lot of that has been because of the Birmingham Shopping District, which really promotes the downtown's businesses, but also does things like Christmas lighting and make sure the sidewalks are plowed and all of that. How has Birmingham changed because of the PSD?
Well, the PSD, what we would do, I think I'd like to make just a couple of quick comments about The PSD board is unique in the sense that it's quasi-independent. It's like the library board, in our city of Birmingham. But what it did is you have specific representations. You have so many property owners, so many businesses, and we have and 2 residents. And we're fortunate because in Birmingham there's like 25 committees, and it's the only one that has a city manager on it. So you have a good cross-section of people in town. And so the other thing that we did right at the beginning is we said, if you want to be on this board, it's not like show up once a month and go home. If you want to be on this board, you have to also be involved in the committee. So we created 4 committees, back to your point, Bob. We have, committees for business development, and we can get into that in a second, maintenance, special events, and marketing. So you have to, if you're going to be a board member, you have to be an active board member, and we have people. So that brings an entrepreneurial spirit, a way of looking at things, maybe a little not traditional ways that maybe government would look at it. And so I think over those years, that energy and excitement and people being very committed to it from the board side. And we also, I would say, we got amazing support from the city commission because we do a special assessment, once every 3 years. And, and then our budget's about $1.2 million a year.
Well, as a Birmingham business owner, I can attest to how effective the board has been, and it is a working board. But it gives Birmingham that advantage. It provides the marketing dollars and the promotional dollars that are necessary to be competitive. And very much like you said, like a mall, Birmingham's not a mall, but it lets it compete with a mall. And it's so interesting that one of the reasons for starting that was the expansion of the Somerset Mall, and businesses were probably a little concerned about that.
And then an outgrowth of that, when we looked at it in the study group, and I co-chaired this committee on parking. Because one of the issues when you get into a downtown versus a mall, as we both know, is, do you have adequate parking and what it looks like. At the time, back then when we started, there was you had to pay to park we have 4 parking decks in the city. You had to pay. But we created 2 hours free parking. Now, why 2 hours? Our studies showed that when somebody went to the mall back then, they stayed an hour and 20 minutes. So we said, okay, 2 hours free. And then we worked with the parking system. And Birmingham is fortunate, and I don't know about other cities, that it has its own parking system, which is not part of the city government budget. It's called an enterprise fund. So it has its only way it gets money is from user fees and bond issues and special assessments to support it. So it has created a very viable way to support the downtown area and the businesses by having a parking system. We have 4 decks.
It's always, I'm an urban planner, and it's always parking.
Right.
And Birmingham's a city of only about 20,000 people, but it has, I think, 3 or 4 million square feet of commercial, almost the size of a city of 500,000. And I think one of the secrets of Birmingham's success has been its parking. As you know, in the 1960s, it implemented a plan to build 4 or 5 parking structures, which allowed the offices not to have to park on site, which allowed for more walkable downtown. And I didn't realize the BSD was part of the parking strategy, but it really has the best parking, I think, strategy in the country. And that's where the first 2 hours of the garage are free.
Yes.
And meters are, but you pay to park for the convenience, and the meters can be expensive. But the users have a choice. They can park for free and walk a block or 2, or they can park relatively close to the storefront. Absolutely.
And then also when we do special events and special promotions in conjunction, there's a separate board for the parking system. We do free parking for the day and stuff like that. So there's a good collaboration of recognizing the importance of parking, your point, and how we support that, because then also the parking system helps support the density, as you commented, with the offices. But the retail, it's critical that we have people feel they can come and they have access and they can easily get in and out. The other thing we've done, we've worked at different times on valet parking too, at different times during the holiday season and stuff like that. We try to make it as easy as possible for somebody to come to town.
Are there lessons that Birmingham has implemented or that you've been involved with that could apply to other small cities trying to revitalize their downtowns?
Yeah, I think, a couple lessons. I think, first of all, it's important to have involvement, citizen involvement and user involvement. I call user, I'd say the business involvement, because what I think makes Birmingham unique as I look back over time is whether you're a property owner, whether you're a business owner, whether you're an office person, there's always been this collaboration and enthusiasm to support the development. So you need to have kind of that structure or that capability to have people maybe put their personal desires and needs aside a little bit. I know everybody has to have their own economic interests, I get that. But really think about the greater good of the greater benefit. And then I think the other thing you need to have is something like a PSD so you can organize that thought process. And you can organize and you can create programs and activities to do that and help the property owners and help the businesses. You know, like for example, Bob, we have one of our 4 committees is business development. Our job is to go out and help the property owners recruit businesses. But what we do in our recruitment is we're always concerned about a thing called tenant mix. You know, we want to make sure we don't go too skewed one way or the other, because retail is the core of what we're trying to do in the downtown area from a retail side, and make sure we have the retail mix. And then we go out and we work on a regional and national basis, and you can see the types of tenants that have come to Birmingham. That's all because of that effort. You know, it's good to be located where we are. It's good to have the infrastructure we have, but still you have to recruit. And then the other part of that whole business development, which I think is important too, is not only is it recruiting, but retaining. And once you have a good retailer in, you need to do everything you can to make sure they stay. It's a lot easier to help somebody stay than go out and find new, and all the economics with that. So, you know, it's that kind of collaboration. And I also would say it's important to listen. Listen to the community, listen to your constituents who make up the PSD, and you can, you know, get a more viable thing is just don't come in and think you've got all the answers. You don't.
Yeah, and even though Birmingham is a fairly upscale community, the process and the technology is applicable to cities of all sizes, probably, and of all locations.
Yes.
And you mentioned something very important, is that there's a strategy of what types of retail and restaurants the city wants, based on what the residents want. And the landlords just don't put a for rent sign in the window and hope somebody drives by and takes it. The PSD is very active. They retain an expert to go out and attract targeted businesses and to help them link with the downtown business owners.
Yes.
And property owners.
And what we do is on the tenant mix, we review that every year or two. And if we think we're skewed one way, or we have a deficiency in another area of a type of retailer, we put all our efforts and concentrate on doing that. And we've been fortunate that, you know, because of the location, the improvements, our landlords being very open to things that we've been able to attract. And what we want is a mix. We don't want all national tenants, maybe like a mall. We want mixed national, they help, regional, but we also want a small entrepreneurial business, which really drives, I think, people around the state that think about how you get that mix. But it's important to have that energy and excitement of people who live in your community, who have a business in your community, and they help round out your overall program.
It's so interesting because a lot of the communities we work with say, Bob, we want a vibrant district, but we don't want any national retailers. Some of them say, except the national retailers I personally like to shop at.
Right.
And Birmingham's attitude is, I think, to bring the types of businesses that people like to shop at, the brands people like to go, and I agree with you that to have a mix. Generally, we like to see a third local, a third regional, and a third strong national. And you know, that traffic that goes to that Banana Republic or whatever will bring people to the other small retailers.
Yeah, and you make a great point. You got to have some national for help that draw. You know, we consider our primary market 5 zip codes that adjacent our area, and you know that's a little over 100,000 people, and so that's our primary area. But it's important that you have, because you also. You know, we haven't done it recently, but we did street intercepts and other kinds of asking people what kind of businesses they want or what kind of shopping experiences they want. So we listened, and what they were doing, and so we could make sure that we were rounding that out, because you just don't take, somebody shows up doesn't mean it's necessarily what you want.
Now I want to get back to you a little bit. You were the mayor, I think, for 2 terms of Birmingham.
1 term. But
One
yeah,
term,
yeah.
okay. What insights could you give other mayors and other elected officials and policymakers for their communities?
Well, we were fortunate in our Birmingham is we had a city manager government. And I am kind of, because I experienced that, went through it, I'm a fan of that, because you have the continuity and the consistency of a professional management. Understand, also I would say my thing is understand your role, and understand what your role is not. And what you need to remember as a mayor, you're elected by the people, absolutely there to represent them, absolutely. But you're there to set policy, you're there to set the budget priorities, and then let the department heads and if you have a city manager government, let them run the city day to day. The worst thing you can do, in my judgment, is to start to micromanage, because that starts to stop what you're trying to do with consistency, because the key is mayors come and go. That's true, mayors, you recognize it, but you need to have consistency, because if you have consistency, then you have viability in your community, your downtown, and you want that to go. It looks like you don't swing from one extreme to the other. So it's just understand your role, step back, take a deep breath, and trust the system to work.
So I think you're saying, as a policymaker, as a mayor, set the policy, set the overall goals, hire and retain the right personnel, but then let them implement the plan under the direction.
And hold them accountable, but hold the right people accountable. Don't start micromanaging 6 levels into a department. You hold the right people.
Now, a lot's changed in politics, I'm sure, since you were the mayor here.
Yes.
What's changed? How do mayors' roles change when you were the mayor?
I think, from my observation, I think there's a lot more people who want to, maybe move outside their boundaries, what I just described as their role, feel like they have to be more aggressive or more involved. And I think also mayors are getting a lot more pressure. I think social media I didn't have that when I was mayor, so I didn't have to put up with some of those problems. I think that then puts a lot of pressure on a mayor, and maybe sometimes how do you put that in perspective? How do you honor it, but you listen to it, you don't let it drive things to the point of impacting other responsible, good governance.
Yeah, and I know you were the president of the school board too, and I know the school boards have had a lot of pressure too recently.
Very much recently, and I think COVID has really been a lot of pressures and people coming out, on how to handle COVID, and students attending, not attending, and people getting very much. I've always said on the school board, I had 5 terms as president, that a lot of the issues that happened when I was on the school board were I call adult issues. Kids' issues, dealing with curriculum, making sure we were teaching the right thing, make sure we had the right policies, the right procedures, the right safety factors, the right facilities. That was easy. It was challenging. But when we had the big flare-ups, it was because of an adult issue, which was about what some adult wanted, not necessarily in all cases what was the best interest of the student. So we always had to kind of keep everybody, we listened again, but we got to remember we're here for the students. We're not here for your own personal, situation. And we went through redistricting. We closed schools. We had all kinds. We got on national TV over sex education. We had issues, but I think you just got to again have a great superintendent, which I was fortunate when I was on the school board. We had John Hoffler. That we just keep our focused and keep moving ahead, listen, react, respond, but don't let it drive the agenda for what's best for students.
So set your sights on the goals and keep those goals.
Right.
I think I met you working on the Birmingham's 2016 plan
Correct.
some time ago, probably, I don't even know when that was, 1996, I guess.
Yeah.
Talk about the role of urban planning for city policy and city economics.
Birmingham recognized early, and this was in 1996, the importance of urban planning. Urban planning is you need to have a strategic plan in which to implement and meet the goals and aspirations of your community. And different communities will have different goals and aspirations, so no question about it. But an urban planner could come in and help structure that, because when we got involved, there was pressure in Birmingham to go to a one-story town called an FAR of 1. Well, us in the business community felt that was not the best use of the town. So what did we do? We brought in yourself and Dewani. And then, because see, it was important in government, in cities, is bringing people together, listening to each other, understanding different ideas, and then come up with a consensus One of the things we're missing today, it's hard to get consensus. But you then bring into consensus, and we had people want FAR1, we had people wanted a 6 or 8 story town. Guess what? Through your work and your leadership and Dewani's, we ended up with an FAR4. But one thing that we did is we recognized that we wanted to bring residential to our downtown. We felt that was a deficiency, as it was pointed out by the urban planners. So we said, if you want to build a 4th floor, and some people want that density, owners, developers, it's got to be residential. So you've seen this budgeting growth of downtown housing, which we do now. The only thing that I didn't understand back then, that we ended up in Birmingham getting skewed to the high-end price point. So I think what the master plan I know you're working on now for Birmingham's got to start looking at ways to change that housing mix to make it more diverse or economically than just go high-end.
But it's good to plan long range for cities, and I remember in that plan, the city really only allowed 1-story buildings, and at a time, I think that they counted the basement as a story, so there was a time they had a negative 1-story zoning.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think Andreas Dewani asked the residents, I think they did an on-site master plan for a week, and I think he asked them if they wanted to be a village, a town, or a city. A city requires taller buildings, more density, but you have a nightlife and you have a more vibrant place. And overwhelmingly, they said, we want to be a city. So he pointed out that means you have to be 4 to 5 stories tall. You have to have,
right,
whatever. And the city embraced that overall. And even though it was a major change to go from 1 story to 4 or 5 stories, that was embraced. And a credit to the city for doing that and listening to the residents.
Well, and what I think, 2 things. One, we were fortunate we had infrastructure to build on, such as the parking system was already in place. Now that they've added, since that time, we've added another parking structure, but they had 3 of the 4 exist at the time. So some infrastructure was in place which helped facilitate that. And then the other thing I give the city credit for, and the city administration under Tom Marcus's leadership, is they took the plan, and it's sometimes plans, as you well know, can sit on the shelf and collect dust. This plan was implemented. If you look at the plan, if somebody wanted to go back and do it, the key is not only create the plan, but implement the plan. And Birmingham did a good job. You look at the parks and what's happened there. You look at the way the downtown streetscape is. All that came out of the plan.
I can't overemphasize that the city manager, Tom Marcus, who's the city manager again, really did implement the plan. I think we made over 400 recommendations, and I did an audit recently, and I think all but about 4 of the recommendations have already been implemented, which is unheard of.
Yes.
As a planner, we're lucky if 1/3 of our recommendations get implemented, but Birmingham has been in the forefront of urban planning. Back in the 50s, the 60s, when they implemented the parking garages and the ring road and all of that. And I think that's one of the secrets of Birmingham's success. Of course, great demographics and great leadership, but also they've adopted progressive plans and implemented them.
Yes, and there's been that commitment. Again, community involvement, leadership from the city commission, and the city manager, professional government to make it happen. But I'm really, as I look back, is the ability to implement. And of course, that required capital dollars too. Some of this is not, just make some zoning changes. There were investments made that you see today, and then that helps us whole tenant recruitment, tenant attraction, reason people want to live. One of the things Birmingham is very fortunate, people, the value of homes tend to be higher within Birmingham, closer to the downtown area. That's unique. Because you have that community, that involvement, that walkable city that we talk about. Birmingham is fortunate, has, like, from a planning viewpoint, we have 12% of our land in parks. That's a high, that's the goal, but not a lot of communities are able to achieve it.
It's so interesting that often commercial is a negative, but in walkable cities like Birmingham, the closer you live to the downtown, the more valuable your property is and the more desirable it's lived.
Well, and one of those outgrowths that came from that was the Bistro District of allowing more restaurants. And then what created from the plan that you're referring to, we wanted to have outdoor dining, and we wanted to have activity on the street after 5 o'clock. That all was part of the 2016 plan, but the city figured out a way to do what they called bistros. and created that whole activity. So you see outdoor dining, that all came out of the 2016 plan.
How does the city fund things like parking structures? Those are public structures. They're rather expensive to build. How did those get funded?
Well, what they did, there's two parts to it. It's a special assessment of the budding property owners, because they have a benefit, as you point out, Bob. They don't have to create on-site parking. So they're using this common parking structure to help meet their parking zoning needs. So they come. So when they started out the system, 40% of the cost to build a structure was assessed to the property owners. And then the other part comes from user fees. And then what you would do is, based on the forecast, you would go to the market and borrow bond money. So you have the down payment, 40%. It's 30%. Each deck was different. And then you said, this is what the revenue stream is going to happen. And then you went out and sold bonds.
We're going to wrap it up in a minute, but that's a very big issue, is that the parking structures were paid for by the businesses that benefited them, those property owners. Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner didn't pay for those structures. The
Absolutely.
users paid for them.
And that's misunderstood.
So, Jeff, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up.
Really?
In a
We're
minute.
done?
Can you give us more suggestions about how other communities can improve the quality of life for the residents in the community?
I think that they need to be focused on their community, what the needs of their community are. I engage the community in some type of strategic planning, long-range visioning, bring in some urban planning, and talk about how you can create that. Now, I'm coming from a bias that you want a community that is diverse, with an economic downtown area, and also a strong, vibrant residential area with amenities like parks and that type of thing. But you need to have, the thing is, think outside the box, dream, hope, and then bring together the resources to make that a reality.
And, that's so interesting, because not every community wants to be a city. Some communities want to be a beautiful parkland or rural, and so, but you listen to the residents, community, what they want. If they want to be rural, figure out how to plan and have that. If you want to grow to a city, do that.
And I do have a bias. Just don't sit and rest on your laurels and think things will happen. You have to take the initiative, you have to be involved, and you have to think about the future for future generations, and do it, whatever that may be in your community.
Jeff, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure learning about your background in Birmingham and the applications for other cities. And thank you for joining us today. Until next time, I'm Bob Gibbs.